It's time for Talkin Tauntauns, your Star Wars source at AIPTcomics.com.
Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome to another episode of Talkin Tauntauns. I am JJ Travers, and I'm joined, as always, by Connor Christensen and Jim Lehane. It has been a while for us. I don't even remember what the date was for the last recording. That might also be because with quarantine and working from home, the days just blend together, but it definitely feels like it's been a while.
It was early July when we last recorded.
It's been 6 years.
In quarantine.
Connor, you're a man now.
Yeah. I have grown from but a boy into a man.
I was actually listening to our last recording yesterday just because I like to hear if there's any issues that go on. And it was a funny episode. I laughed quite a bit. Also, I apologize to Holly again on not looking up words of what I need. As I introduced her, I'm like, I probably shouldn't have used that word. Bombastic is not a good word.
Words are hard, man.
The more you know. Yeah, so Star Wars, guys. We got some stuff to talk about. Comics. I'm really excited about the comics. That's what I'm probably most excited for. So that'll be a great discussion. There's some cool video game news. There's exciting news for the folks who created The Mandalorian. We're going to talk about the Dr. Aphra audiobook.
You put respect on that name.
Yeah, we'll sprinkle some other things in there. Connor, I saw that you put this in the show notes, so I guess we'll get this out of the way. I got a new Star Wars tattoo.
It's very rad. Like, you sent it to us, and I was like, God damn, that's a good, like, that. A lot of people get Star Wars tattoos, and, you know, and I'm not hating on any Star Wars tattoos, but they're like, oh, I got the Rebel Alliance signal, or I got the Jedi signal, whatever, and they're, you know, they're cool, but they're just like, oh, okay, that's kind of generic. You got one that I've never seen before, and I was like, damn, that is sick.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I mean, to be fair, I also do have the Jedi Order sigil or crest or whatever you're gonna want to call it on my thigh above my knee, which was awful to get. But yeah, I've wanted to get another Star Wars tattoo for a while, and I wanted to go with something that wasn't very traditional. So I went with the, as Jim and Connor know, I went with the targeting computer for Luke when he's making his run down the channel there on the Death Star, and the famous line, you know, Luke, you've turned off your targeting computer. But that you know, always just like, I watched New Hope recently, and I watched something else old school recently. It might have been Tron. And just like that old school, like super 80s technology.
The line art
yes,
graphics.
Exactly. No, it wasn't Tron. It was The Last Starfighter.
Oh, going back.
which I love. I still watch that movie. And as I said, I just watched it fairly recently. But I just really like that old school 80s line art. So I was watching A New Hope, and I had been itching for a new tattoo. I have over 25 at this point. So I'm always kind of itching for a new one. And I saw the targeting computer, and I was like, that's it. Perfect. And I'm super stoked with how it came out. My buddy, his name's Steve. He works at Cobra Custom in Plymouth, Massachusetts. For any of you New Englanders who are looking for a tattoo, he's excellent. Highly recommend him.
Yeah, it's awesome. Great choice. I am still a tattoo version. So, which is weird because I'm the youngest on the show. You'd think I'd have tattoos. I don't. I'm scared of needles.
And they're really expensive.
That's true. I've purchased too many Legos recently to splurge on tattoos. Speaking of, though, I have now purchased and built both of Poe Dameron's X-Wings in Lego form.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I love his black and orange one.
Yeah, so I bought the Rise of Skywalker one just on a whim one day. I was kind of bored, and, you know, there's not much to do. San Diego right now, so I was like, I'm gonna go get a Lego. And so I wanted the black one, but they didn't have it, so I'm like, oh, it's fine, I'll build the Rise Skywalker one, even though it's not as cool. And then my dad, for my birthday, got me the Force Awakens one, which was awesome. Nothing better than being 27 and still getting Legos for your birthday. But I built it last night, and it looks awesome. I actually like the black one, like the build of it more, because the wings like move into the X-foil easier and better, whereas like with the new one you have to hold the mechanism instead of it just like staying put. Anyway, that's Lego talk. Legos are fun.
Yeah, I built the Last Jedi, the Last Jedi pose X-wing.
That one's gray and bluish, right?
Well, it's just a pile of Legos. Because it gets blown
I know.
up at the beginning of the movie.
I don't know why.
When Jim started talking, the tone of his voice, I was just like, "Here it comes."
I didn't know I had a dad joke tone.
You always have a dad joke tone. I've learned over the years, and now I can start to tell by the tone of your voice when I'm in for it.
See, we are nearly,
that's good to know.
We are nearly 2 years into this podcast, and I still fall for Jim's jokes every time.
Oh,
at least you see them coming. I still don't, which says a lot about me and my intelligence.
I've trained myself to know when they're coming now. Prepare myself mentally.
So my big Star Wars achievement I beat the Nintendo, the original Nintendo, the Empire Strikes Back game, which, my word, like between this one, I also recently beat the Nintendo's Star Wars game, and they are so freaking hard.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say those games are not easy. They're harder than probably every Star Wars game out today. They are no joke.
Yeah, they luckily I mentioned before, I have a Retron 5, which you can play Super Nintendo and Nintendo games on really easily. It like loads up real quick and stuff, and you can plug in the original controllers, which I still have. I still have the original game systems, but why use them when I can use this one? And this one has the ability to upload every Game Genie cheat in existence. And so, which is like basically like if there was a cheat made for this game, you can load it up and turn it on for the games, which I just realized on the last board where I could not beat Darth Vader and I kept getting knocked into the pit every 2 seconds because I didn't have the super lightsaber. I never found it in the game. And so I'm like, well, there's a cheat that I could turn on all the force powers I never collected. I'm getting that. After like 5 hours of not being able to beat Darth Vader and getting knocked into the pit, I'm done.
The difficulty in the game was the inspiration for the difficulty in Jedi Fallen Order. Which you're still waiting to get to that, aren't you, Jim?
It's I'm going in order of release, and so by Corona year 2036, I will have gotten to Fallen Order.
That's great. And don't worry, they still will not have addressed the graphic issues of the Wookiees in that game, which once you play it, you'll see what I'm talking about, because the Wookiees in Jedi Fallen Order, for some reason, look like they're soaking wet all the time. It's very weird. It's very unsettling.
That game's a blast, though. I had a lot of fun playing it.
It's a good game. There's things that I like to make fun of. I do go back and play it every once in a while.
Well, my biggest issue is... I was just saying my biggest issue on playing that is just the location of the game system. I like playing upstairs because that's kind of where my family congregates, and that's where my Star Wars room is. So all of my video game systems, except for the Xbox One, are in my Star Wars room. The Xbox One is downstairs where my daughter can also sometimes play. And so that's it. I don't want to play video games down there. I just don't. It's not as comfortable as in my Star Wars room.
Since we're talking about video games, I figure this is a good segue for us here. Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga. I didn't know this was a thing. I just watched the trailer when I saw Connor put it in the show notes, and wow, the trailer blew me away. It looks amazing. I can't wait to play this. Star Wars Lego is always fun, but this just looks incredible. Like, there's so many iconic moments. that they nailed. And they also added that, like, if you've ever played any of the games, you'll know that famous, like, Star Wars Lego sense of humor and flair to it. It just looks so much fun.
So have you were aware that they have come out like with the original trilogy and the prequels and I believe The Force Awakens. Okay. So I as far as I'm aware, this is those games, maybe just a little remastered. But those 7 boards combined with 8 and 9, which as far as I'm aware have never been released. 9 definitely not, but I don't think 8 has either. And put into one giant package.
From what I've understand, they've reworked a lot of the gameplay mechanics to make it more like fluid. Like the shooting mechanics are just like full blown third person shooter mechanics now, which is awesome. I don't to build on what you were saying, JJ. Like I've never really been a fan of the Lego Star Wars games. I don't like dislike them. I've just always thought they were like, yeah, they're kind of fun, but they're not as good as like a full Star Wars game. But I was laughing while watching this trailer because I was like, this looks better than any Star Wars game we've gotten in years. Like this looks awesome. How can they, like, how is it that the Lego game is the one that looks the best? Like, it's a little frustrating because it's like, why can't we just get like a normal Star Wars experience that it looks this incredible, which we did with Jedi Fallen Order. But no, I was blown away by how good this looks. It looks like it's going to be so much fun.
They are a lot of fun. Like I've beaten the original trilogy one, and it's just like fun to go through. Like you have like unlimited lives essentially. You get killed, you just start right back over. And they're not difficult games. They're just fun games.
Yeah, it's about the experience. It's not about like the challenge, which it, as a Lego game, it should definitely be about the experience and the story. And as you said, fun. I mean, they're primarily, I think, aimed at children, but I would say that this is not a game that your age is going to dictate whether or not you can enjoy it. I've always enjoyed playing the Lego Star Wars games, and this one just looks, like I said, incredible. I can't wait to get it. It's early spring, and it's coming out on basically everything. So the new consoles coming out this holiday season, but also the current generation for Sony and Microsoft, as well as PC and Mac and Nintendo Switch. So you can play it on pretty much anything that's like reasonably current these days, which is awesome.
Get it on your
play on my
N-Gage.
Nintendo?
On your Switch, sure.
No, the NES.
But yeah, I'm excited. It's sounds like it's not that far off. I mean, spring 2021. Hopefully it's not like late spring. And I'm curious what they're going to do for the price point on this as well, since it's kind of like 9 mini games in one.
Yeah, I couldn't find the pre-order. I just saw like it had like a super pre-order, but there was no links to like a pre-order or anything.
Yep. And then we had, let's see, what was the other game? Oh, Star Wars Squadrons. So we got a full gameplay reveal. I watched a streamer that I am a fan of play for about 20 minutes, and it looks fun. I just don't know that I feel a huge desire to invest $40 into it. It looks like something that like I'd like to try the beta of first before I actually spend money on it.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I know when it first got announced, I was pretty stoked because it was like, oh, like this is like the X-Wing / TIE Fighter PC game that we've been wanting for a while. But I almost feel like they need to stop showing bits of it, because the more they keep showing it, the more it's like, oh, this looks actually kind of shallow, and like it's really just a it looks like a standalone version of Starfighter Assault, with a slightly different interface. And while like Starfighter Assault on Battlefront is fun, it's not fun for more than like a half an hour.
Yes, it's exactly that. It's like that's a component of a much larger and deeper game.
Exactly.
This just feels very shallow, not in the way that it's trying to present itself as something that it isn't, but it's just there's not a lot of depth here. I just feel like I'll have fun, but I'll also get super bored very quickly because it just looks very repetitive. The combat looks great. The ships look amazing. I love the customizations. And, you can combine like up to, I think, like 50 different modules on your ship to really customize how you want it to perform. Because like tons of games say, oh, you can customize like crazy, and like min and maxing certain stats doesn't actually make a big difference in the long run once you actually are playing the game. I can't say whether or not that's the case here, but just from like seeing what you can do, it looks like it'll get old pretty quick. I was hoping for a more Rogue Squadron approach, and this is unique and different, so that's cool, but it's still really important to me that I have single player missions and a story that I can go play. Like, I want to go run famous missions and famous star battles from the Skywalker saga, like that's what I'm interested in addition to the PvP.
As far as I'm aware, you're not going to be doing that. Like, the story mode is set before or after Return of the Jedi and before the Battle of Jakku. That 1 year time after right before Empire kind of gets completely wiped out, because it ties in with the Alphabet Squadron series, I believe.
Oh, I didn't know it tied in with Alphabet. That'd be sweet.
I haven't read the newest book out yet, but I believe Hera is in the book. Like, she may not was she in the last one? I think she was. She's in this book, and she leaves the book to go to the game, essentially.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, the trailer they released at Gamescom was more narrative focused. And unfortunately, it still feels a little bit like what we've gotten from, with the exception of Jedi Fallen Order, but what we've gotten from the Battlefront games, where it's like the narrative single player story really takes a backseat to the multiplayer / just like pure gameplay. Which, like, for any other game I wouldn't really mind, but it's Star Wars. Like, in Star Wars I want a story. And this one, the story, like, the coolest part about the story is the fact that Hera's in it, and you see Wedge Antilles in it too, so that's pretty cool that you get these iconic Star Wars characters, or iconic for Star Wars nerds. But it is, for me, I think what JJ touched on is part of where my disappointment is. It's like, well, I kind of want to play, like, give me the iconic Star Wars battles to participate in. Like, I like that you're expanding the lore and everything, but also, like, let me do the trench run. Let me fight over Scarif. Let me be a part of the Hoth evacuation. Let me do all those things, and then maybe sprinkle in some new battles at the end. But yeah,
If you want to be a part of the Hoth battle and the trench run, I got 2 games for you. They came out not too long ago for the original Nintendo Entertainment System.
The graphics aren't as good, but they're still pretty sweet. They're detailed. You can tell what you're shooting at. Yeah, I'll probably still buy this game because it's a Star Wars game. And it's not a full $60 price point. Only being $40 helps. But it just it looks a little shallow. That's my only worry.
Yeah, see, unless they add some depth to this, I see that price point coming down. I'm gonna wait and see if I can pick it up like I did Battlefront for like $10 on some special sale. They're really gonna have to add some spectacular things for me to want to drop money on this. I mean, Jedi Fallen Order, it was just like, okay, it's a brand new story in this expansive world, and you can travel between planets and build your own lightsaber. You had me sold, but this looks to be a very clearly defined PvP experience that is not very expansive. And I'm not saying that it's not a good game and that people shouldn't buy it. It's just that for what I'm personally looking for in a Star Wars game, it's not meeting all of my requirements.
Yeah, speaking of price point, I pulled up Lego The Skywalker Saga game. Pre-order on Amazon is at $50, and the list price is $60.
Well, I'll probably definitely get that.
Yeah, Lego Star Wars over Squadrons.
I'll get both because I'm a shill.
Because I'm a shrill shill.
I don't think I'm shrill.
So, Disney has gone and done something horrific and monstrous.
Horrific. If
That's
you're
a
talking
strong
about
word.
what I'm talking about, this is wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, them's his fighting words.
I guess we'll see what happens when it comes out. Since it's in Lego, I have hope that I'm sure it'll actually be great. But the original Star Wars Holiday Special is something that I don't know anyone, maybe besides Jim, that's ever watched it more than once. And I don't know anyone besides you two and myself that's actually sat through the entire thing. So Disney is creating a new Star Wars Lego holiday special that's nodding to the original Star Wars holiday special, as well as like a Christmas Carol. I don't know when it's coming out exactly, but it's going to be...
I believe it's coming out on November 17th, if I'm right, which is when the original holiday special came out, is that date.
And it looks like it's only... Is this right? It's only 45 minutes long?
I believe so. It's going to be a Disney
Yes.
Plus exclusive.
Yep, November 17th on Disney Plus. And what I find so awesome about this is, so the weird thing about the Lego cartoons is that they technically are what's called canon adjacent, meaning that if it takes place within a specific time period, you can't have characters that had died during that time period. Like, it doesn't need to be true to canon, but the characters need to be kind of true to canon. And this takes place after The Rise of Skywalker, where we have no stories yet. Nothing we have has taken place after The Rise of Skywalker. And this is going to be pretty much our first story.
See, that confused me because there's screenshots of Mace Windu and Obi-Wan and Darth Maul.
I imagine that it's going to be like one of those, like your frame story is after The Rise of Skywalker, but it's going to have little stories within it, kind of similar to like the holiday special where you had the Boba Fett cartoon.
Because what I'm looking at shows like Sith troopers facing off with like 6 Jedi, and Mace Windu and Obi-Wan are 2 of them.
We'll see what they do.
I mean, either way,
Guys, it's the holiday special. We know they're not going to actually fight. They're going to have like a weird dance battle or something like that.
I mean, just to be
great.
clear, I'm sure everyone understands this, but I was very much joking when I was saying horrible and such at the beginning. It's Lego and it's Star Wars. I haven't experienced a single product from Disney and Star Wars that was Lego based that I didn't find like cheeky, adorable, and really fun. So I'm generally looking forward to this.
I just love that the first post Rise of Skywalker story we're getting is an homage to the worst thing to ever happen to not just Star Wars, but probably the worst thing to ever happen to sketch variety television and Bay Arthur.
I really wouldn't be surprised if they still aren't sure what to do post Skywalker saga, like where to take things. That's a larger conversation, I think, for a different podcast. But I just wanted to throw that little 2 cents out there on the subject.
I think they should just do another full holiday special. You know what? Actually, I vote that they just remaster and re-release the original holiday special. Make everybody sit through it and be like, oh, you guys were upset with The Rise of Skywalker, or you're upset with The Last Jedi. Well, we could have done this, and we didn't. So we're not that bad. So you mentioned, JJ, you don't know anyone other than Jim who has watched it twice. I have not watched the full thing twice, but a couple months back, my dad found the full thing on YouTube, like the full holiday special, and I did watch like the first 15 minutes again.
Surprised you made it that far. It's usually about 4 minutes in, and I'm sitting there going, why am I doing this to myself?
And I was watching it, I'm like, this is somehow worse than I remember it being. Like,
yeah.
That's why, like, I saw, when this got announced, I saw somebody on Reddit was like, oh, I hope they capture the spirit of the original. And I
hope they don't.
Just like, what did you just say? Well, I remember when watched the holiday special for our Christmas episode, and I think I was 2 minutes in before I was messaging Jim saying, "You son of a like, why are we doing this?"
How dare you? It's something I tell all people to go watch it. It is like, you know how there's that threshold of like so bad it's good. This holiday special, the holiday special, which I know we've talked about before, so we can move on in a second. But I will just say that the holiday special crosses the "it's so bad it's good" threshold so thoroughly that it does a lap and goes all the way back to just being bad again. Because it's just, it's that bad, and I cannot recommend watching it enough to people. Just so you can see, like, here's what, like, people always complain that what's going on with Star Wars, everything, it's a blatant cash grab. It's a cash grab. They just want to make money. You want to see a blatant cash grab? Watch the holiday special. That's a blatant cash grab.
So
Yes.
The episode that we talked about this was all the way back in episode 4, Red Sleigh Standing By, when we were still Star Wars in poor taste. So if you wanna hear our thoughts on it, you can go all the way back then, and that was a fun episode.
Good times.
Yes.
Good times.
So much fun.
The episode was fun. What went into doing the episode, I wouldn't say was fun.
That's a better way to put it. Yes. Some other. This is old news, but we might as well just throw it out there real quick, because it's been a while, as we said. The Bad Batch is coming to Disney Plus in 2021. I think everyone wanted that, and everyone is happy about that.
Yeah, cool. It's good news. Weirdly enough, I've seen people arguing, is this a Clone Wars sequel or is it a Rebels sequel? And I was like, I don't think it's a sequel to either. It's its own thing.
It's a spin-off of the Clone Wars. It has.
Yeah.
I don't think it has anything to do with Rebels. From what I gather, it's going to take place fairly close to Revenge of the Sith, like after Revenge of the Sith, but fairly close to it. Where Rebels is nowhere near Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be cool. We talked about it when that story arc was going on, in season 7 of the Clone Wars. They're cool characters. They were fun. It's an interesting, little side plot to the Clone Wars we hadn't seen before, and I'm excited to see where they all ended up. And I think it's a good idea for a show. I don't think anybody's upset by this, and I think everybody's pretty excited.
Yeah, I can't wait.
I wouldn't be surprised if they started this during like Order 66, like to see
Dude,
how
I would love that.
if they had the chips in them, like we get those answers like first episode, like what's going on with this guys. That
was like one of my biggest questions with them after they went away in the first arc of the final season. I was like, I mean, these characters are so interesting. Like, we have to get more from them. Like, what happens with 66? I remember when we were talking about this arc on the show, I think that was one of the big things that we discussed. So I would be thrilled if that was where they chose to pick things up.
Yeah, and as cool as it would be to see, because I do want to find out, like, okay, do they have the inhibitor chips in them? Do they work? What's going on there? I think as cool as it would be to see them, like, defending Jedi against clones, it would be really cool if you just saw the Bad Batch, like, click and just massacre Jedis. Like, just...
That is not going to happen.
I know that's such a dark way of looking at it, but, like, God, that would be cool, where it's just, like...
Disney is not putting that on TV.
Where they turn on whoever's leading them, and it's just, like, brutally efficient takedown. I would love that. Now, like you said, Disney's not going to put that on.
And the first episode of this kid-friendly episode, oh my God!
What's, Bruiser rips a Jedi's arms off and beats him to death with them.
All right, moving on. The Mandalorian was nominated. The Mandalorian was nominated for 15 Emmy Awards, which is crazy. Yeah, so they cleaned up. I'm not gonna read them all off, but the majority of them is really for what I kind of expected, which is like makeup, music, sound editing, special effects, camera work, cinematography, which totally makes sense because if you haven't watched it, there's a documentary series on The Mandalorian on Disney Plus. It's incredible. I highly recommend it. And in it, you will see how Jon Favreau and the directors and the production staff that worked with them pretty much pioneered a number of filming techniques. And it's really impressive and incredible to see. I can't recommend the series enough. So having said that, so many of these nominations make total sense to me because of all the incredible work that they did in those areas.
I was just surprised they got the like what would we consider like the big one. They got nominated for Outstanding Drama Series, which is awesome. Like that is like not that to me was the biggest surprise. Like you said, all the technical ones is like, oh yeah, like they're a shoo-in for that. They like you said, they did what George Lucas did when he originally made Star Wars, which is like pioneer new technology. Like we want to do this, the technology doesn't exist to do it. Well, let's just make the technology then. So they'll probably win all those awards. But to see them get the Outstanding Drama Series nomination, Giancarlo Esposito got nominated for Best Guest Actor. Taika Waititi got nominated for like Best Voiceover. That's stuff that I was really surprised by, and is really, really cool. Just to see like they do, you know, their flagship series for Disney Plus, their first live action Star Wars series, just like continually be more and more successful is awesome, and just shows like, look, you could like maybe the future of Star Wars is TV, and the movies will kind of play second fiddle. I don't know, but it is really cool to see the TV show just continue to blow up and keep succeeding.
Yeah, and on top of that, the Resistance actually also got a nomination for Outstanding Children's Program. So the little cartoon that could.
Yay.
That I've seen a total of 3 episodes of.
It had its high points.
It gets better. From what everyone tells me, it gets better. But the same people who tell me it gets better are like people who are like, yeah, but I couldn't get into Rebels. And I'm like, oh, well, that's weird.
So you're insane.
Like, that's crazy to me.
I say it gets better, and Rebels is my favorite.
Well, just
no. Oh, go ahead, Connor. I'm sorry.
Well, not to sidetrack us. But this probably will sidetrack us a little bit, so my apologies for that. But I just want to say really quickly, it blows my mind that there are people who so, so ardently defend the Clone Wars can then turn around and be like, yeah, but Rebels is a kid's show. And it's like, I've watched both of them. Clone Wars is way more of a kid's show than Rebels is. Like, I don't understand that argument. And like, people are like, well, the first season of Rebels is super slow. And it's like, the first season, after 2 episodes, Rebels picks up. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm biased towards Rebels, but like,
no, it's not. It's not you. It's not you.
To me,
the first season is extremely slow compared to the other 3 seasons.
Yes.
But I am 100% with you on the Clone Wars remark. Rebels is far darker. Maybe the last season of Clone Wars is the one that you could argue for here, but overall, I feel like Rebels is far more serious in tone and darker than the Clone Wars was. But we don't need to spend an episode splitting hairs about that point. But my main point I want to make is that Rebels is incredible and my favorite Star Wars animated series.
Same. And I know Jim is on that train as well. Jim's
definitely. I still like Rebels more than The Mandalorian, actually.
Yeah, Jim is the one who got me to watch Rebels. And I agree. I think Rebels takes the cake.
Yeah. I don't compare it to The Mandalorian because animated and live action. So I can't line them up next to each other. But speaking of, since we're talking The Mandalorian, I just realized we're like, a little over a month away?
Yep.
We should have been. We likely would have gotten a trailer this weekend. Had Star Wars Celebration gone on as planned. In fact,
don't remind me.
I don't want to depress you, Jim, but this literally just dawned on me. I should be at Star Wars Celebration right now.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, we should be frolicking about.
Ready? I'm gonna beat
Disneyland.
you, Connor. You're upset about Star Wars not being an anniversary? My wedding got postponed.
I was so gonna be like, oh, my name's JJ, my wedding. Oh, I knew you were gonna go there. Congrats.
So, in order of important life events, celebration, a little higher.
A little bit, just a bit. Just a bit. People get married all the time, JJ.
Listen, guys, I'm not going to disagree with that, but if my fiance listens to this show, which thankfully she doesn't, I said the exact opposite.
We can use the extra listeners. Maybe.
Yeah, she doesn't have to listen to it. Just tell her to press play and leave her phone somewhere. Anyway, that's our depressing news for the episode. Is we all were supposed to be doing cooler things and we're not.
Should we talk some Dr. Aphra?
Yes, please.
So, I don't remember which of my two co-hosts had the idea, but one of them did, to listen to the new audio drama written by Sarah Kuhn, which is Star Wars Dr. Aphra. So, Jim, I know that you're our resident Star Wars historian. I believe there's only been one audio drama prior to this about Dooku that's actually in canon. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the Star Wars audio dramas go way back to the audio dramas of the original trilogy. And they're actually they're kind of a lot of fun. They were written by Brian Daley, and he was one of those who also wrote some of the original trilogy, not the original trilogy, but spin-off novels back in the 70s and early 80s. And these audio dramas basically take the original trilogy and blow them up. So A New Hope is 10 hours long, and they seriously are a lot of fun. I definitely recommend anybody to go back and listen to them. A New Hope and Empire came out in 70s. They were sold to NPR for $1 by George Lucas just so that these can be made. Return of the Jedi eventually got made. But you had John Lithgow was Yoda in Empire, and Mark Hamill.
Here.
Yeah, Mark Hamill, I'm pretty sure, actually came back and did Luke. Han Solo was definitely not Harrison Ford. But they were a lot of fun, and they were the original audio dramas that came out for Star Wars. And so Star Wars kind of has a rich audio drama history just based on these alone. Eventually, other audio dramas were made on mostly redos of some comics back in the 90s, Dark Empire, I believe, was made into a audio drama. Some of the Tales of the Jedi comics were made into audio dramas, but really it never took off. It was kind of here and there until in canon, what you said. Yes, there's only one audio drama in canon, Dooku Jedi Lost, which for an audio drama it wasn't that great, but it was a nice return back to people, return back to this old time when people really liked these audio dramas. They're listening to the radio to get your stories sort of thing. And the weirdest thing about audio dramas is that unlike a audio book, where an audio book is really just somebody reading you the book, and when you read a book, they have background information, and you can have a character sitting, character walks outside, it's a sunny warm day, there are trees on the yard, and that's not a weird thing. An audio drama is entirely narrated by the characters. So anything that happens has to be included in that narration. And so if the character sees something, they have to say what they're seeing. And it can be very awkward at times, unless you have a really good writer doing it. And Dooku Jedi Lost was close. It wasn't a fantastic audio drama, but it was a step in the right direction. And so that's where we get to the Dr. Aphra's audio drama, which is the second in canon now.
What a wonderful summation, Jim.
Yeah, nice job.
You are such a cornucopia of Star Wars fun facts and knowledge. It always blows me away.
So Dr. Aphra is written by Sarah Kuhn, and it's an adaptation, essentially. This is not new content. So the first 25 issues of Marvel's Darth Vader comic book crossover with the first 25 issues of the Star Wars comic book that are running parallel to one another. And Kieran Gillen introduced Dr. Chelly Lona Aphra, and quickly she became this huge success. A lot of times, hi Ahsoka, a new character gets introduced and people in the Star Wars community hate them, and then a year or two later,
especially when they're women.
Yes, especially when they're women. We gotta be better, guys.
Jesus.
Yeah, seriously. So there are plenty of success stories where time goes by and then people realize they're idiots and this character is awesome. There was no really period of time where Aphra was perceived by anything from the majority of the fandom except as awesome. She is, I know Connor and I share this, our favorite new character, I think, period, for Star Wars in like the last 10 years.
I would say, for me, second only to Han Solo, as in like favorite character just at all.
Yeah.
She's incredible.
She is an incredible character. She is basically Indiana Jones, Lara Croft, and maybe even Angelina Jolie's character from the horrible early 90s film Hackers, which if you haven't seen, that's fine. I don't expect anyone to have actually seen it.
Such a deep cut reference.
Yeah, sorry. I'm a big bad movie nerd. But yeah, so she is a hacker, she's a rogue archaeologist, she's a smuggler, a thief.
She's also entirely narcissistic and like it's all about her.
Yeah,
and she's self-destructive too.
think
just a little.
Indiana Jones in space, except a kind of a terrible person.
Yeah, there's.
It's like
if Han Solo didn't decide to be a good person and help Luke and Leia and the Rebel Alliance. It's kind of like that.
And Han Solo was an archaeologist, if you can believe that.
In a different universe, but yeah, it is a person. She's Space Indiana Jones, who's a terrible person, and but also feels bad about being a terrible person.
But then just continues to do bad, selfish things. And it's really all stems from. So she was introduced in Darth Vader #3, and then ended up being so popular that she got her own comic book, which is amazing. The first run was incredible. I have every volume. It's one of my favorite Star Wars comics. I can't recommend it enough. And we're going to talk about the new run that's happening right now from Alyssa Wong, but that's later in the show. So at this point in Aphra's story, she doesn't have her own comic book yet. It's what's happening her between these two comic books. And deep down, there is trauma that Aphra has buried, and that is really the primary reason for her behavior that's not that good, which is pretty much her behavior all the time. But she has this wonderful layer of happy sarcasm. That's the best way I can say it. And she's makes no attempt to hide what type of person she is either. There's certain narcissists out there that refuse to acknowledge their bad behavior and will compulsively lie and shout and deny that they're a jerk. But Aphra she's so smart and fully knows what she is and how she acts and makes no real apologies for it. And when she does make an apology, it's not sincere. And it was just so nice for me to see that this audio drama pretty much perfectly captured that.
So I think the one aspect of Dr. Aphra that you haven't actually gone into that is extremely important, not to the character, it's just one of her traits, but to us as an audience, is the fact that she's gay. And she, I believe, is the first major character in Star Wars to be gay. And this entire story is basically a love story. And I love it for that. In that we are fully confronted. She is treated just like a normal character. There's nothing special about her being gay. It's just what she is. And they treated it perfectly.
Yeah, it is. I can't remember where I saw this, but it's something where you constantly have in a lot of stories where they include LGBTQ characters, there has to be this justification of why they're gay or why they're transgender, and that's a problem. And in this, there is no she simply exists, and that in itself is powerful. There's no need to justify why she's gay. She just is, because that's what people are. And I love that. And I was very surprised by this being like, this takes a little bit to get going and to get into the heart of the story, but it's around like, so it's like, what, 5 hours long, 5.5 hours long. And I think it was like an hour or so in that I realized like, oh, this is a love story. Like that's where, because you approach this, and as JJ mentioned, this is really just an adaptation of a lot of the comic book stories that have been told with added little flair and like filling in some gaps. And the new content that you get in this, if you haven't read the comics, or if you have read the comics, sorry, but the new stuff is it's centered on this love story between Dr. Aphra and Sana Staros that really is kind of glanced over in the comics. Like it's referenced in the comics, but it's not really fleshed out in the comics. And this really fleshes out their relationship to give it a completely new perspective. And now I need to, my little brother, I let him borrow my comics, so I don't have them right now, but now I want to go back and read all those stories, because it's like, oh, I'm going to look at their relationship differently now.
Yeah, it's the comics, I say they barely mentioned it. Maybe like some other material where Aphra was in, we barely mentioned it, but in this you get like full chapters devoted to her backstory while she was in school with Sana. And I don't think we've ever had this much on Sana. Like she's always been like a side character that was occasionally came into the main Star Wars comic run, but like never the star.
So that was something that I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something I wanted to talk about. Sana Staros is a human female that was alive during Galactic Civil War, because she's obviously in this audio drama. But so far, we've only seen her in the comic books. And it took me a minute when I first heard the name. I was like, is that really who we're talking about here? Or is there someone with a similar name? So I had to stop the audio drama and look it up to be sure. But I thought she was such an interesting character when she first came on the scene, because she claimed to be married to Han Solo. And he denied it. There was this huge tension between her and Leia. She hunted Luke for a bounty at one point. She interacted with Lando Calrissian. And of course, she hunted Aphra down. But I don't recall during those comics, and maybe it's just my memory's off, that there was any hint of a romance between the two during those comic books, which was what made this so surprising, but also cool to me, because I really enjoyed the character in the comic books.
There definitely was.
I think it's in Rebel Jail, but it's like there's like one or two not throwaway lines, but like one or two exchanges where they just say like, oh, we have a history together. But that's kind of it. Like, there's no, like, and I had always assumed, like, oh, like, they hooked up once and it went awry. Or they had a job together that went wrong. Like, I never thought of it as it being like, oh, no, they had a very, very, like, visceral romance together.
Yeah, full-on relationship.
Yeah, I didn't,
yeah.
and
We're
and that
kind of
was,
in love.
Yeah, it was a little surprising to me and a little jarring at first, listening to this, being like, wow, like, they are really leaning into this. Because I hadn't seen it in the comics, but it ends up being like the strongest part of the story, and I think that's what really makes this worthwhile. Because that was something, as I was listening to it, I was thinking, I'm like, who is the audience for this? Because if you're a comic book reader, you know all of these stories already, and you might get a little bored because you're like, well, I know how Vader Down plays out, and I know how Dr. Aphra originally meets Darth Vader. I know how Rebel Jail plays out. I don't need all this. But on the flip side, if you're not a comic book reader, you might be a little lost because you don't know the reference points of what they're talking about. So you might like not really have any idea of what's going on. It's harder to really picture in your head what's happening. So I like for a while listening to this, I was like, I don't know who this is for and who this is going to succeed for. But then as the love story really develops and gets going, that's when I was like, oh, this is what makes this story worthwhile, is that it's really not about Dr. Aphra's existing story. It's about her relationship with Sana Staros, and that is what makes it special. Even if you have read the comics, and even if you haven't, that's what makes this story worthwhile.
So couple of comments on what you guys were saying. Sonosaurus actually is not only in the comics. She had crossed over to the novels as well. She was in the flashback scenes of Last Shot, which is the Han Solo Lando Calrissian novel, where a lot of it actually took place. Like I'd say probably about half the, if not more of the story took place before A New Hope. And so she had a major role in that. I don't know. I don't remember exactly if that's where we got the wife scene, like where they pretended to be married. All right. And what you were saying about how this is an adaptation of the comic books, but it's kind of weird in that it's all from Aphra's point of view, and so you get these things with Vader, where Vader is like one of the main characters, but also peripheral. Like everything happening to Vader's peripheral to the story, and so you get these weird allusions to what's going on in the rest of the comics. And like anybody who's read the comics goes, I know it's exactly what's happening. And meanwhile, in this story, you're like sitting back as Aphra going, what's going on? Like, what is happening here?
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge of this audiobook, because I was talking to my dad, who's read all the comics, he's like, well, should I listen to it? And I was like, well, if you've read the comics already, I'm not sure if you should. If you're a big Dr. Aphra fan, absolutely, you should listen to this. But like I think the best way to do this would be to read the comics as you listen to it. Like pause at certain points and read the comics alongside this to flesh out. Because like you said, they allude to these huge things that happen in the comics that are just brushed to the side in this. Yeah. Which makes sense because it is Dr. Aphra's story. But for instance, like this comic covers Vader down. And
yes. From well, it happens
barely.
During Vader Down. It'd probably be a better way of saying it.
Which is crazy because like Vader Down is such a massive comic event, and in this, like you only get Dr. Aphra's side of the story, which is just a smidgen of this awesome Star Wars story. So that's where like this audio drama is a little uneven, because as it tells this really, really amazing love story, it also completely brushes over some really, really big events in Star Wars and some really awesome Star Wars stories. So it's interesting in that way, and it's a positive and a negative that it gets to tell its own story, but it's also kind of rehashing old events. I don't know. I still am constantly grappling with how much. I definitely liked this, but I don't know how much I liked it, is I guess the way to look at it.
I thought the story was fantastic, and the voice actors, Nicole Lewis, Sean Kennan, Mark Thompson.
So Aphra was played by Emily Wu Zeller.
Yes.
And like she had to have about 90% of the speaking roles, if not more. It was all her, and she was perfect, like pitch perfect as this role.
Yeah, like when she was talking, I pictured Aphra. It was everything that I imagined the character would be. My problem is that I don't do audiobooks. I do regular books. I don't do ebooks. I just like a book.
So it's like clearly this was not made for you. Like first off, like this is not made for you as the audience.
JJ's fighting an uphill battle.
I mean, I can acknowledge that my personal preference for how I ingest media like this, it just wasn't for me, and I'm not taking points at all off the story for this. It's just when I listen to podcasts, but when I listen to a podcast, I'll work out, or I'll be commuting, or I'll be doing work during the week. But if when I read a book, I can't do work because then I can't ingest it. And a lot of times when I'm listening to podcasts while I'm working, it's because it's not that important. But this is something that I wanted to pay a lot of attention to. So I spent, an hour and a half or so cleaning the apartment, and then it was pouring rain out. So I was like, well, now what am I going to do? And with a book, like, my mind and my eyes are focused on it. But with an audiobook, I'm just kind of sitting there listening. So it's so much more challenging for me to like focus on the media because my other senses are very much just kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do while this is happening? And again, no knock on the audiobook whatsoever. It's just audiobooks are so very much not for me. But putting that aside, I thought the story was excellent. They nailed so much about the character. And as you said, Jim, Emily was just perfect. She was the incarnation of Aphra that I hoped and expected for.
So for me, actually, and I remember talking to you guys about this on Slack, I had to warm up to the voice actress for Aphra. And don't get me wrong, that is absolutely my own fault, because when I read comics, I always have an actor or actress that I'm picturing, like, doing the voice. It helps me, like, kind of, like, get more immersed. And the voice in my head for Dr. Aphra was always Chloe Bennett from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Don't know why, but that was just always who I pictured. And like, she's a younger actress, like, in her mid-20s. So this version of Aphra just, for whatever reason, just sounded older to me, and it took me probably like 25 minutes to get used to it. But then after a while, I was like, oh yeah, no, she nails Aphra. Some of the jokes don't land, I would say. But for every joke that doesn't land in this book, there's one that absolutely does.
I was laughing out loud so much during this.
Yeah, I was too. But I also think part of Aphra is that a lot of her jokes don't land. It's her just trying to, like, make awkward humor because she doesn't know how else to react in situations where people are absolutely furious with her.
Yeah, and I think that's where you get this little disconnect between an audio drama and a comic. Is, like, in a comic, you get to see the body language, you can see the facial expressions, and understand, like, oh, like, this is a purposefully awkward exchange. Like, whereas in an audio drama, you just hear a joke that fell flat, and you don't necessarily get the context of, oh no, that was like that wasn't a bad joke in the sense that the writer was trying to do something funny and didn't work. No, the writer was purposely writing something that didn't work to create tension and awkwardness in this situation. And without the physical context clues, the visual context clues that you'd see in a comic, that could be a little lost. So there were a couple moments in the book, in this, sorry, I keep wanting to call it a book, but it's not a book, it's an audio drama. But there were a couple moments in the audio drama that happened to me where I was like, oh, I'm sure in the comic, like, this plays out a little bit differently. But the one thing that Sarah Kuhn nailed is the personality of Aphra, and the very much, like, hides her outlook of the world under sarcasm, and it works perfectly. One of my favorite scenes was towards the end when she is just hammered drunk at a bar because she just realizes, like, Vader's gonna come kill me, so I'm gonna get blasted drunk waiting for him. There was a lot of it was very dark, but also made me laugh a lot in those scenes.
I think my favorites besides Aphra were 000 and BT, like the personality from the comics and the, like, glee at the chance to torture and sacks of meat and all, like, everything that I love about those droids from the comics I felt was pretty well represented here. And that's really hard to do. As you said, Connor, there's challenges when the only thing you're getting is audio, when you're when you're familiar with these characters because of the comics. But I thought they did a great job with it.
Yeah, Sean Kennan voiced 000. I thought he did fantastic. Nicole Lewis, who you mentioned, was Sana Staros. And my big surprise really was Mark Thompson as Darth Vader. And anybody who's listened to audiobooks knows Mark Thompson because he has done the majority of the Star Wars audiobooks. He's been, like, the main audiobook person. And I believe he also produced this as he's, like, slowly not doing the audio, but he's, like, since he's been involved with this for so long, he's been the producer of almost all of these, like, most recent things, like the audio dramas. And him as Darth Vader was spot on.
Yeah, it sounded exactly like the films. Like, no difference with Vader. And he nailed the sternness of everything he says.
It definitely, like, when I look at this overall, audiobooks are not for me, but that doesn't mean that this isn't a really good addition to the Star Wars universe, because it is. And if you enjoy audiobooks whatsoever, or you've never tried them and you'd like to, I can't recommend this enough. This doesn't you know, really leave any launching points for the character because it takes place in the past and there's so many flashbacks. But it's still a really great addition to Aphra's legacy. And it just gives us so much more information about her past, and it definitely just enriches the character.
I do want to go back to one thing, because you mentioned 000 and BT being a big part of this. Obviously, they have to be. And as I was listening to it, I was just thinking, and this is not a bad thing. I think this is a good thing. It's part of what makes these two characters so great. But, like, if you are not a comic book reader, if you are just a Star Wars fan who was just, for whatever reason, has gotten into the comics, there's a lot of Star Wars fans like that, but you're into the books, it's got to be so jarring to be introduced to 000 for the first time, because it's just like, he is so over the top dark and grotesque and gruesome. I almost want to be in the room when someone listens to him like really talk about torturing people for the first time, because it is so hilariously it's such hilariously the inverse of C-3PO, where it's just like, man, this guy, this droid revels in torture, and it's so unsettling. But it's something that was captured in this audio drama so perfectly, is that, like, he's gleefully just this horrendous, personality matrix.
So to wrap up, how I feel about this is, you can go on to AIPT Comics and read my full review. But overall, I gave it a 9 out of 10 because I absolutely loved this. I thought it was fantastic. I was immediately in. And a big part of that could have been because I did read the comics before, and it wasn't perfect. It relied heavily on the comics, and it really, you needed that background for this story was an adaptation of the comics from this one character's point of view. So it was meant to rely on the comics, and so you can't really ding it for that because that's how the story was written. But it's also, since it is an adaptation of a previously told story, you kind of lose some of the suspense that could have been there, or the what is going to happen next, because you kind of already know a lot of it. And so, I felt like, take this, what you have here, take this and make your own story. Like you're saying, JJ, like a kickoff, but you don't even need it to be a kickoff. Like, how much of the Indiana Jones movies are kicked off into the other movies? They're really not. They're all standalone movies with Indiana Jones as your main character. You could do that with Aphra. Have an Indiana Jones type adventure, but with Aphra as your main character, sort of like what they're doing with the comic series right now.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think they're testing the waters with exactly that in this character right now in the comic books, because this is the first time that we're getting an Aphra story that really has nothing to do with the rest of the galaxy that we're familiar with.
And I think that would be perfect for this story. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, and as for me, my final thoughts, I don't know if we're all giving a score, but if I was rating this out of 10, I think I would say 7.5. It's good. It's super enjoyable. The 5 hours flies by, especially if you just go on walks and drive while listening to this. But a lot of my
unfortunately, Connor found himself 5 hours away from home and didn't know how to get back.
Oh no, I legitimately at one point did drive 2.5 hours, and I was like, oh god, I gotta turn around. My shortcomings with this are echo a lot of what Jim said. Is if you have already read the comics, the stakes here don't exist because you know what's going to happen. Moreover, you're only getting one perspective on these stories in the comics that are honestly probably the 3 comic storylines that are kind of adapted in this are the first 15 or so issues of Darth Vader, followed by Vader Down, and then Rebel Jail. And those 3 sections of the Star Wars comics are some of the best Star Wars stories that have been told within the comics. Like Rebel Jail is actually it's probably my favorite Star Wars story aside from Vader Down. So you get these really, really awesome stories from the comics, but you only get a chunk of them. So that's where this falls flat for me, because I still would say go read the comics instead and then come back to this. But what makes this work, as I mentioned earlier, is the love story between Aphra and Sana at the core of it, and that's all new. It doesn't matter if you've read the comics or not. That's entirely new perspective on Aphra. So I would, if you are a diehard Aphra fan, absolutely you have to listen to this. If you are a comic fan, it's hit or miss, and if you've never read the comics, I would say go read the comics first and then decide for yourself.
So as we were saying, there's some really awesome stuff going on the Dr. Aphra comic, and there's a lot more Star Wars comics out right now, so it's time for Comics Corner. Since we were just talking about Dr. Aphra, I figure we can jump right into issue number 3. So as Jim and I were kind of saying, this is the first time since the character's been around that she is really on her own. And I mean that in the way that even after she stepped out from Darth Vader and Star Wars, where she was introduced and got her own comic series, a lot of her stories were still involving either the Empire, the Rebel Alliance, or important characters that we're already familiar with. Dr. Aphra, in its current incarnation, doesn't involve really anyone except for Black Chrysanthemum, which is a black-haired Wookiee bounty hunter. But he was a new character as well and isn't from the films or the books, so I don't really count that. And Aphra is off on an archaeological, like, very Indiana Jones type adventure, and the politics of the galaxy at large are not thus far involved at all. And before we talk about the issue, I just want to say how much I love that.
So actually, we have 2 issues since our last episode, because issue number 2 came out at the end of July, and then issue number 3 just came out within the last couple of days. So I haven't even seen issue number 3 yet.
But actually, I to build on what you were saying, JJ, it is refreshing to get a story, and it's part of what makes, we'll get into bounty hunters. It's what makes bounty hunters a little disappointing. But like it's cool to get a story that it's like it's this side of Star Wars we don't get to see as much. And that's what makes it great. It's part of what made Solo succeed. It's like, look, this isn't about the Galactic Civil War. This isn't about good versus evil. This is about like seedy underworld types doing terrible things to each other, all in search for personal advancement. And in this case, searching for the fabled Rings of Vale, which is a cool little archaeological plot that they have going on here. But it is, I agree, it's absolutely refreshing just to be like, here is what, so you have the greater Star Wars saga, the fight of good versus evil, and here's what the normal everyday people were doing while that happened. And I love that.
I wouldn't call Aphra normal everyday people.
No.
Well, I mean, but like, you know what I mean?
We know what you mean, Connor. She's not like
a civilian,
a Force user and part of like the larger than life characters in the story that we're used to in Star Wars. Also, I said this is from Alyssa Wong, but I forgot to mention the artist Marika Cresta, who has done an incredible job so far as well. So apologies for not including her name in the initial statement there. But as Connor said, and I mentioned, Aphra is after the Rings of Vale, which supposedly, if you wear both, grant the user eternal life and good fortune. So they're, on this long-lost planet. They found this long-lost city. There's booby traps. There's bad guys after them. It's very like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade in a way to me.
It's very creepy. The second issue, and they don't lean into it as much in the third issue, but in this issue number 2, it's very, very creepy. It's gothic. It's like the walls are made of skeletons and muscle, and these creatures crawl out and attack them. It's like, it's very weird and scary, and I love that. It was like, cool, like we're getting into like they're like this dungeon essentially. Like, it's awesome. But also something that was mentioned about the Rings of Vale that I wonder if they're going to play with later is I believe it's Professor Eustacia, who is one of the academics in this little treasure hunting excursion. She mentions that when you wear the rings together, that you have powers that rival the strongest Force users. And I'm really interested to see if that comes into play at some point. And if we get to see, like, I would love to see what would Dr. Aphra do if she could basically wield a Force-like power for a little bit, because she would do terrible things.
Money.
Exactly. Like it's the idea of like what if Luke Skywalker wanted to just steal things. I think that could be a fun like story arc later on. But then again, it would be like, okay, but now she's basically a Jedi, and is that really what we want? Who knows? It could be fun.
We do not want that.
It could be fun for an issue or two, as long as it's not like really overdone. But what really stuck out to me with the second issue is just how, like I said, how creepy it was, and how you kind of get this like horror-esque vibe to it. I don't know if you guys felt that way as well.
I'm a huge horror fan, so I like anything in that vein. I didn't find it particularly creepy. I just found it more like Tomb Raider, Indiana Jones, like Uncharted, like ancient ruins, booby traps, which I love and I wanted more of. This is exactly what I want for this character. Less galaxy-wide politics and factions, more creeping around ancient tombs, messing with stuff that shouldn't be messed with.
Yeah, the one thing about the rings that they mentioned in the second issue is that they warn the rings are not to be used separately, and that they do have negative side effects, where the one that it grants eternal life also drives them to madness, and the one that grants incredible fortune also hastens their demise. And so I don't know how you can have eternal life and also have your demise hastened, but I feel like they could take an interesting twist with when people start wearing these.
Yeah, and I like how they touch on the fact that, like, oh yeah, like these creatures that they're seeing are people who tried to wear the rings by themselves, and this is what happened to them. They kind of hinted that, and I like that. It's just this whole legend that they've in just 2 issues that they've built around these rings is super interesting, and is already like has me absolutely hooked on what's going to happen when they find these rings. And now we won't get into issue number 3 because there is kind of a major plot turning point that I don't want to spoil for Jim. But issue number 3 kind of like just makes things a little more complicated. But I'm really like we can like it sounds like we're kind of just fawning over the Dr. Aphra series right now, and we are, because it's really good. It's arguably the best Star Wars book on stands right now. But it's just like it is such an interesting archaeological storyline that I love so much, and I just hope they keep doing this. Like, keep just doing stories about her looking for weird things from the past, and explore that the seedy underbelly of Star Wars, plus like the weird mythical non-Force like side of Star Wars. I love it so much.
All right, let's talk about the main Star Wars series. So there's been a bunch of delays with this for obvious reasons, but now we're at issue number 5. So Luke is without his blaster, without his lightsaber, because this takes place between Empire and Return of the Jedi. So this is not long after he's got his new hand on, and he received a vision of a woman through the Force and a planet, and he's found that planet, and he thinks he's found that woman. What do you guys think about this one?
I thought this issue just went by lightning quick. Like, I was done with this issue before I even realized, not much happens in the issue. Issue number 5, it like basically Luke lands, confronts the woman runs away, traps Luke, and the issue's over.
I never noticed this before. Usually comics take me around like 20 minutes to read, because like I'll really like look at the art and stuff. 8 minutes last night. Took me 8 minutes. I mean, it was a reread for me, but still, I read this in 8 minutes. Which is disappointing, because Star Wars number 4 came out in March. Now, granted, completely understand why it had to be delayed. Makes sense. I'm not complaining about that. But it does suck that like the first issue back is, as Jim said, lightning quick.
Yeah, you guys hit on my complaints for it. It's just nothing really happens. It feels like it's over in a minute. Like, chase scene, you're in a trap. I explained some basic things about Star Wars, which it's cool. Like, we now know how Luke learned about these things, like Order 66, but it's not information that's new to any reader that's remotely familiar with Star Wars. And then it's over. So I was pretty disappointed with it. It felt very filler. And this was one of those moments where I was like, and this is why I like to wait for graphic novels to be out before I read a comic series.
Exactly. And, you know, it's cool to get because the Jedi he encounters, if I'm not mistaken, is a callback character from the second Darth Vader run. She escapes from the Jedi library. So it's like, it was kind of funny. It's like, oh, Charles Soule is bringing back one of his own characters. But yeah, it's just so quick, and it is still weird to see. And obviously, this is the whole point of this era that we're looking at with this comic series. But it's like you know, we're in between Empire and Return of the Jedi, and this Luke that we're getting right now is still so naive, and it's just, I'm looking at it being like, man, like, they're going to have a lot of work to do to build Luke from this naive farm boy who still just does stupid things. Like, in the beginning of this issue, he just says, like, he just walks up and is like, excuse me, are you a Jedi? And it's like, dude, you know that Jedi are this secret thing that are basically banished in this world. That's so naive and kind of dumb of you just to, like, go around asking those things. So they have their work cut out for them to be like, you have to build him up into this wise sage of a Jedi, and it's weird to get an issue like this that doesn't really move that forward at all.
Good news for you, Connor. I have it from reliable sources that it all works out in the end.
I was worried. I was very worried.
Last time I saw, Luke died. So how is this all working out for him?
That's that tone of voice I was telling you about at the beginning of the episode. Should we even talk about bounty hunters? Are you still reading this, Jim? I gave up after issue 1.
I read everything. I literally read everything. But right. I haven't gotten the latest bounty hunters, so I don't know.
All right, let's skip this one.
I'll give my 2 cents on it as quickly as I can. Bounty Hunters number 4 is win the series for me, because we talked about it many times. I also agree that it is a disappointing series overall, because it just didn't seem to be going anywhere. This is the first issue that made me go, okay, I like this. Because there's a little twisty twist that shows you, like, okay, why did Nakano Lash do what she did? And why was it important? And why did it ultimately spark this war between the Mourner's Wail and the, I'm blanking on the name of the other one. So I would say, if you've been on the fence with Bounty Hunters, this is the issue that's going to make or break whether this issue survives. I think it's, from here on out, is going to get more interesting. Plus, it teases more Boba Fett, and we haven't really gotten any Boba Fett in this series, so it's cool. Anyway, that's Bounty Hunters number 4 for everybody.
I should also point out that I hate story tropes where, like, a TV episode will start you off in the middle of everything's gone wrong, how could this happen? And then 2 seconds into the episode, you jump back to the beginning. Well, this is how it all started. And that's exactly what the comic is doing. And I hate that trope.
Literally every issue actually starts like that.
Yeah, it's freaking drives me mad. I don't like it when TV episodes do it. I don't like it when books do it. I just don't like that.
All right, so last but certainly not least, Darth Vader. So this is the 3rd time they've rebooted this comic and given us a new series, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
Man, every time I'm like, I don't know, like, there's only so many stories you can tell. This character's been dissected a million times, and here I am again, happy to be wrong. Greg Pak and Raphael Lenko are the writer-artist team on this, and man, it's so good. It might be, I don't know, it's hard for me to say, but this and Dr. Aphra are neck and neck for me as far as my favorite Star Wars comic right now. And they're really digging into what happened with Padme and Vader's rage after he finds out that Luke's his son and he was hidden and kept from him. and they're involving Padme's handmaidens and so much of the past of the character of Padme Amidala that people are aware of, but probably have never said, like, oh, I'd like them to dig into that. And Greg Pak has found a way to take all these old, obscure characters and moments and tie them together into this really great story.
So I've been having a problem with this Darth Vader series, and I think it comes from listening to the Aphra book and realizing that, like, Aphra had talked to the mortician who basically, like, prepared Padme after she had died, which was in storyline time roughly 2.5 years before this comic takes place, and now Vader is going back to Naboo trying to find out what happened to Padme after she died. It's like, it seems like a weird disconnect. Why did this take 2.5 years to do this? And how the two first issues started with him teaming up with Sabe completely turns on its head, and I don't kind of like how it turned. I don't see how he's still going forward. Like, why is he still progressing on the path he is? I just don't see that anymore.
Have you read 3 and 4?
I have read 3 and 4, and I also truly hate the cover of 3, where he's back to back with Sabe, and it's just I just don't see that ever happening. Yes, I know it's a cover. I know it's not meant to actually, like, represent something in the comic, but it's just a very weird juxtaposition of the two characters.
See, I see where you're coming from, Jim, and I love this, but I do agree with you where it's like, if you really, like, look at, like, what he's doing and why he's doing what he's doing, it does make you go, like, well, why did he wait so long? Especially because, like, this is basically what he tasked Dr. Aphra with. And yes, Dr. Aphra withheld some information with him, but, like, when you think about it, it's like, what did he get distracted with? There was Vader Down happened, but Vader Down happened over a couple days. So it's like, what was he doing in the other, 1.5 or 2 years in this time that took him so long to do this? So I understand that, but what I'm loving the most about this is it's the inverse of what I was complaining that, like, the main Star Wars series has to show you how Luke goes from naive farm boy to Jedi savant in the year or so in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, whereas what Darth Vader has to do is show you how Darth Vader goes from unemotional, stalwart of evil and of the Sith way to back to Anakin Skywalker. And whereas the Star Wars series is really not progressing that at all yet, this is going headfirst into showing how Darth Vader kind of reverts back to Anakin. And I love how it is this really emotionally driven character study about, here's Darth Vader having to mentally confront the things that he's done, and he's having these flashbacks to these happier moments in his life, and he's realizing all the decisions he's made and how he has dismantled the happiness he had, but he also has to physically confront all of the people that he hurt along the way. It's like this very, very emotional journey for him that he has to slowly realize all of the ramifications of his actions, and how all of it was for naught. And I really, really enjoy that, and I think that's what makes this series so strong for me, is it is just in the way that the Aphra audiobook kind of recontextualized a lot of the things that happened in the comics. This is really recontextualizing Return of the Jedi for me, and showing, like, here's how he was already on the way to flipping, because he was slowly realizing how horrendous everything he's done is. And I think that's what makes this so strong for me, is it is very slowly showing us that turn from Darth Vader back into Anakin Skywalker.
I don't take it that way at all. I take it as him being driven by rage and anger. I don't see this as him turning towards Anakin whatsoever. I see him destroying that legacy, and his rage of having to relive these moments, it just further driving him down the path of the dark side. And as far as the timeline goes, it makes perfect sense to me, because after he became Darth Vader, the reason he was in this torturous position was because Padme died, and he didn't know that he had children out there. He thought he killed his wife and his child. So the revelation of Luke being his son is what kicks off this whole series of events, because he knows he was lied to, and he knows that Padme may not have died right away, and that he has a son. So the fact that he didn't confront any of this after his transformation into Vader makes perfect sense to me, because there was no reason for him to do so. And it was also the source of his greatest pain and rage, and the reason that he was in the horrible position that he finds him in, just in unending suffering as the Emperor's slave. But this revelation of Luke just leads this whole comic series. And I think it makes perfect sense. And I can see your argument, Connor, for him so slowly starting to turn towards Anakin, but just the unending rage and anger and hatred and desire to just like destroy all these people and all of this to get his answers, to take his son back and make him strong instead of being weak. I don't see Anakin in this. I see only Vader.
And I think you hit it on the head, that it is like he is being driven absolutely by, I want to destroy all this. I'm done with all this, moving back. And I think in that pursuit, I think it's when we're going to have these moments where he's going to fail at destroy. Well, actually, obviously we know he's going to fail at destroying his past as Anakin, because he does eventually revert back. But I think we're going to slowly see how he fails, and I think that's what's really interesting to me. But I do think you are right that like he's ultimately being driven by this rage and this anger of like, how dare they lie to me? I needed to destroy everything about my past, which ties into The Last Jedi too, which I think is nice.
I really like all the moments of people saying that they're doing this for Padme and Anakin, as Anakin is murdering them.
Yeah, that is a little.
I hate it when that happens.
I also love that there's Gungans fighting with them, and I do love the subtle callback to Phantom Menace that they are using. It's kind of ridiculous when you think about it, like that at first when they first go to it, when the Amidalans, which is a cool name, when they go to attack Vader, they're using Gungan weaponry, like the shock orbs and the shields and stuff. And then they eventually switch to blasters. Like it's kind of like, you're like, at first I'm like, why are they using those, not blasters? But it is a cool little callback to the Phantom Menace, which I liked. And that's the thing, actually, speaking of that, if you are a huge fan of the prequels, this series is like, I mean, like every 3 pages, there's a literal flashback to the prequels and moments in the prequels. Like this series does a really good job of weaving the prequels and the original trilogy together very well.
All right. Well, we got through everything. Our first episode back, and we managed to keep it under 2 hours. So thanks for staying with us, guys. It's good to be back. Hopefully it won't be as long of a stretch before our next one. With The Mandalorian coming up in a little over a month, I think it's safe to say that we're going to be having much more regular episodes again. And then we're going to be having the holiday special in November. So I think you can expect a lot of episodes out of us in the coming months. But we appreciate you sticking with us. If you do enjoy the show, we would really appreciate if you could just take a couple minutes, open your iTunes app up, and give us a 5-star review on iTunes. It does a huge amount of help for the show, and we really do appreciate it. You can find all of us on aiptcomics.com for a whole bunch of other Star Wars content, as well as the most comic book reviews anywhere, every Wednesday. If you want to get on the show, if you want to give us some feedback, ask a question, whatever, you can shoot us an email. Jim, you want to tell them where they can reach us?
Sure, they can send an email to Talkin Tauntauns, that's Talkin without a G, at aiptcomics.com. And our lack of content has not been for lack of things that we've wanted to talk about. It's really been lack of personal time to record the episodes.
All
right.
right.
That is the biggest myth about about the coronavirus stuff, is that like, well, now we have more free time. It's like, no, I don't. I have less, actually. But yes, it's good to be back, as JJ said, and hopefully we're just waiting on some new Star Wars content so we can talk more about it, but there should be stuff coming up, so I'm excited to get into it.
All right, guys, that's going to do it. As always, thanks for listening. We really appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, you kid.